It is not the world that weakens you. It is the moment you surrender control over your own mind. The Stoics understood this with absolute clarity. You do not own outcomes. You do not control people. You do not command circumstances. But you do command your thoughts, your actions, your discipline. And yet each day, without noticing, you trade that power for comfort, for delay, for the quiet voice that tells you to wait, to rest, to avoid what must be done. Inside you, there is no chaos, only a choice. One path is ruled by reason, by discipline, by the will to act regardless of how you feel. The other is ruled by impulse, by ease, by the desire to escape discomfort. You do not need to defeat the world. You only need to stop surrendering to the weaker part of yourself. Because the moment you govern your inner world, the outer world loses its power over you. This is the true battlefield. Silent, invisible, and unavoidable. You are not held back by the world. You are held back by what you tolerate within yourself. This is the first truth most people avoid because it removes every excuse they have ever relied on. It is easier to blame circumstances, to point at the economy, to question timing, to wait for support. But none of those forces decide your actions. They influence, but they do not command. The Stoics made a clear distinction between what is within your control and what is not. And everything that shapes your life begins on the side you control. Your choices, your discipline, your standards. Yet the greatest resistance you face does not come from outside pressure. It comes from within, from the version of you that has grown comfortable with less than your potential. This version of you is not dramatic. It does not appear as an obvious enemy. It is quiet, familiar, and persuasive. It tells you that you have time, that one delay will not matter, that resting now is justified. That effort can wait until you feel ready. It speaks in a tone that feels reasonable, almost protective, and that is why it is so dangerous. Because you do not resist it. You agree with it, day after day. Small compromises are made, not because you are incapable, but because you have allowed a lower standard to become acceptable. The Stoics would call this a failure of discipline, not in action, but in judgment. You have misjudged what deserves your obedience. Your true enemy is not difficulty. It is the part of you that seeks to avoid it. It is the version of you that chooses comfort over growth, that prefers distraction over focus, that delays responsibility in exchange for temporary relief. And the cost of that choice is never immediate, which is why it is repeated. You do not feel the weight of one missed action, one delayed task, one broken promise to yourself. But over time, those moments accumulate into a pattern, and that pattern becomes your identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who starts but does not finish, someone who knows but does not act, someone who wants more but does not move toward it. This is how the old version of you gains power, not through force, but through repetition. The Stoic perspective forces you to confront this directly. You are not a victim of your environment unless you choose to be. Circumstances can create pressure, but they cannot remove your ability to respond with reason. You always retain the power to act according to your principles, even when it is difficult, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it is inconvenient. That is where your strength is tested, not when things are easy, but when the easier option is right in front of you and you refuse it. Every time you choose discipline over ease, you weaken the hold of your old self. Every time you follow through on what you said you would do, you reclaim authority over your life. The old version of you does not disappear. It remains present, waiting for moments of weakness, waiting for fatigue, waiting for uncertainty. It does not need to defeat you completely. It only needs you to hesitate, because hesitation creates space for doubt, and doubt creates space for inaction. And once you stop acting, you begin drifting. And once you drift, you lose direction. This is how most people lose years of their lives without a single defining failure. They simply stop choosing with intention. They allow the easier voice to lead, and they call it normal. But there is nothing inevitable about this pattern. The moment you recognize that your greatest obstacle is internal, everything changes. You stop negotiating with excuses. You stop waiting for ideal conditions. You stop expecting motivation to arrive before action. Instead, you return to what is always available to you: your ability to choose. The Stoics did not seek control over the world. They sought control over themselves, because they understood that this is the only domain where power is absolute. When you master this, external conditions lose their ability to define you. So the question is not what is standing in your way. The question is, what part of you are you still obeying? The part that seeks ease, or the part that demands growth? The part that delays, or the part that acts? Because the outcome of your life is not decided by what happens to you. It is decided by which version of you you allow to lead. And until you confront that truth without excuse, without avoidance, without comfort, you will continue to fight the wrong enemy. Inside you, there are always two forces at work, not equal in strength, but equal in influence. And every day they compete for control over your decisions. The Stoics did not describe this as a battle between good and evil, but as a conflict between reason and impulse, between the disciplined mind and the undisciplined desire for ease. One part of you seeks order, clarity, and direction. It understands that growth requires effort, that progress demands consistency, that a meaningful life is built through intentional action. The other part resists all of this. It seeks comfort, avoids difficulty, and persuades you to delay what must be done. Both voices exist within you, and neither one disappears. But only one can lead. The disciplined voice is often quiet. It does not argue loudly. It does not create urgency through emotion. It simply presents what is necessary. Wake up. Begin the work. Follow the plan. Stay consistent. It does not promise pleasure. It does not offer immediate reward, but it aligns with who you are capable of becoming. The other voice is more persuasive. It is immediate, emotional, and convincing. It tells you that you are tired, that you deserve rest, that you can start later, that missing one action does not matter. It speaks in a way that feels natural because it is rooted in your habits. And this is why most people follow it without question, not because they lack intelligence, but because they have practiced listening to it for too long. The Stoic perspective forces you to observe these voices without attachment. You are not your impulses, and you are not your emotions. You are the one who decides which voice to follow. This distinction is critical because without it, you begin to identify with every thought that appears in your mind. You believe that because you feel something, you must act on it. But discipline begins when you separate feeling from action. You may feel resistance, but you do not obey it. You may feel discomfort, but you do not retreat from it. You recognize that the presence of resistance is not a signal to stop, but a test of whether you will remain aligned with your principles. Every decision you make strengthens one of these forces. When you choose what is easy, you reinforce the part of you that seeks comfort. When you choose what is necessary, you strengthen the part of you that seeks growth. This is not a single moment of change. It is a continuous process of reinforcement. The Stoics understood that character is not formed through intention, but through repeated action. You become what you consistently do, not what you occasionally attempt. And this is where most people lose control. They rely on motivation, which is unstable, instead of discipline, which is consistent. They wait to feel ready, instead of acting despite how they feel. There is a danger in underestimating the voice of comfort. It does not try to stop you completely. It does not tell you to give up everything. It only asks you to delay, to reduce effort, to lower your standards slightly. And over time, those small reductions accumulate. You begin to accept less from yourself, not in one dramatic decision, but in a series of small agreements. This is how potential is slowly diminished, not through failure, but through gradual compromise. The disciplined voice, on the other hand, demands consistency in small actions. It asks you to do what you said you would do, even when it is inconvenient, even when it is uncomfortable, even when no one is watching. It builds strength through repetition, not intensity. The outcome of your life is determined by which voice you choose to strengthen, not once, but repeatedly. In moments that seem insignificant, wake up or delay, focus or distract, act or postpone. These are not trivial decisions. They are the structure of your identity. The Stoics would remind you that your life is the sum of your choices, and your choices are guided by the voice you obey most often. If you allow the voice of comfort to lead, you will remain where you are. If you choose the voice of discipline, you will move forward. Even if progress feels slow, you do not need to silence the voice of comfort, because that is not possible. It will always exist. What you must do is refuse to let it lead. You hear it, but you do not obey it. And goat, you acknowledge it, but you do not act on it. Instead, you align yourself with the voice that demands effort, that requires discipline, that builds the version of you that you respect. This is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. And every day you choose correctly, the balance begins to shift. The disciplined voice becomes stronger, clearer, more natural, and the voice of comfort, while still present, loses its authority. In the end, there is no external force deciding your direction. There is only this internal choice, repeated over time. Which voice will you follow? And which version of yourself will you allow to lead? Every failure begins long before the result appears. It begins in a quiet moment where a thought is accepted without question. The Stoics understood that the mind is the first place where defeat happens, not in action, but in judgment. A single internal agreement can determine the direction of your day, and enough of those agreements can determine the direction of your life. You do not wake up one day and suddenly fail. You gradually accept thoughts that lead you away from what you know you should do. And because these thoughts sound like your own voice, you rarely challenge them. The voice inside your head does not always appear as weakness. It often disguises itself as reason. It tells you that you are tired, that you have time, that this is not the right moment. that conditions are not ideal. It suggests delay, not abandonment, which makes it easier to accept. You do not feel like you are giving up. You feel like you are being rational. This is where most people lose control. They do not recognize that they are negotiating with a part of themselves that fears effort, fears discomfort, and fears change. The Stoics warned against this. They taught that the first discipline is the discipline of perception, to see things as they are, not as your impulses present them. You must learn to question the voice that seeks comfort, not by silencing it, but by exposing it. When it tells you to wait, ask what you are avoiding. When it tells you that you deserve rest, ask whether you have earned it. When it tells you that tomorrow is a better time, ask why today is not enough. This is not about being harsh. It is about being honest. Because without honesty, you begin to build a life on false agreements. And those agreements always lead to regret. The Stoics believed that clarity of thought is the foundation of strength. If your thinking is compromised, your actions will follow. There is a pattern that repeats itself in almost every failure. First, a thought appears. Then it is accepted without resistance. Then action is delayed. Then consistency is broken. Then identity begins to shift. You no longer see yourself as someone who follows through. You begin to see yourself as someone who hesitates, someone who postpones, someone who tries but does not complete. This is how the internal voice reshapes your self-image over time, not through one decision, but through repeated surrender. And once your identity shifts, your behavior aligns with it automatically. You act according to what you believe you are. The Stoics separated events from interpretation. They understood that what happens to you is not as important as how you interpret it. The same applies to your internal dialogue. A feeling of discomfort is not a command to stop. It is simply a signal that you are doing something difficult. A lack of motivation is not a reason to delay. It is an expected condition that must be ignored. But if you interpret these signals incorrectly, if you treat them as instructions instead of observations, you begin to act against your own goals. This is how the mind turns against itself, not intentionally, but through misinterpretation. Discipline begins with controlling what you agree with internally. You cannot stop thoughts from appearing, but you can decide which ones deserve your attention and which ones should be dismissed. This is the core of Stoic practice: to observe your thoughts, to examine them, and to reject those that lead you away from your principles. Most people do the opposite. They accept every thought as valid, every feeling as guidance, every impulse as truth, and in doing so, they surrender control over their own behavior. They become reactive instead of intentional. The voice that leads to failure is not loud. It does not demand attention. It simply repeats itself until you stop resisting. It becomes familiar, and familiarity creates trust. You begin to believe it because you have heard it so many times. But repetition does not make it true. It only makes it easier to accept. The Stoics would remind you that truth is not determined by how often something is said, but by whether it aligns with reason and purpose. If a thought leads you away from what you know is necessary, it is not guidance. It is distraction. You must replace passive thinking with active judgment. Do not let thoughts pass through your mind unchecked. Evaluate them. Challenge them. Decide whether they serve your long-term direction or undermine it. This requires effort, especially at the beginning, because you are interrupting a pattern that has been reinforced over time. But with practice, this process becomes natural. You begin to recognize the difference between a thought that builds you and a thought that weakens you. And once you see that clearly, your decisions begin to change. In the end, your actions are a reflection of your internal agreements. If you agree with excuses, you act accordingly. If you agree with discipline, you act accordingly. There is no neutral ground. Every thought you accept moves you in one direction or the other. This is why the Stoics place so much emphasis on the mind. Because once the mind is governed, behavior follows without resistance. But if the mind is left unexamined, it becomes the source of your limitations. So the question is not whether you have the ability to succeed. The question is whether you are willing to challenge the voice that tells you not to. Because every failure begins the moment you accept a thought that leads you away from action. And every victory begins the moment you refuse to obey it. The most important battle of your life does not happen in public. It does not happen under pressure from others. It happens in silence. In the first moments after you wake, before the world speaks to you, before responsibilities appear, before noise enters your mind, there is a brief window where only one question matters. Who will lead today? The Stoics treated the beginning of the day as a decisive moment, not because of the hour itself, but because it is the first test of self-control. You wake. Your body seeks comfort. Your mind offers delay, and the old voice returns, telling you to stay, to rest, to wait. In that moment, nothing external is forcing your decision. It is entirely yours, and that is what makes it so powerful. Most people lose the day before it begins, not because they lack ability, but because they surrender in these first minutes. They reach for distraction. They postpone intention. They allow impulse to dictate their next action. This sets a pattern. When your first decision is based on comfort, the rest of your day follows the same direction. You become reactive instead of deliberate. You move from task to task without clarity, without purpose, without control. The Stoics would call this a failure to govern oneself. Not a failure of skill, but a failure of discipline at the point where it matters most. The morning is not about perfection. It is about alignment. It is where you decide whether your actions will follow your principles or your feelings. When you rise with intention, even without motivation, you establish authority over your own behavior. You prove to yourself that action is not dependent on emotion. This is a critical shift, because once you understand that you can act without feeling ready, you remove one of the greatest obstacles to progress. You stop waiting for the right state of mind, and you begin to rely on commitment instead. There is a reason why the resistance feels strongest in the morning. It is the moment when your old patterns are most active, when your habits attempt to reassert themselves. The voice of comfort is not trying to defeat you completely. It is trying to win the first decision. Because if it wins that, it gains momentum. One delay leads to another. One compromise leads to another. And before you realize it, the structure of your day has been shaped by avoidance. This is how inconsistency begins, not through large failures, but through small concessions made early. The Stoic approach is simple but demanding. You do not negotiate with the impulse to avoid action. You acknowledge it, but you do not follow it. When your mind tells you to stay in bed, you get up. When it tells you to delay, you begin. When it tells you that you are not ready, you act anyway. This is not about force. It is about principle. You have decided who you are, and your actions reflect that decision regardless of how you feel. Each morning becomes an opportunity to reinforce that identity, not through words, but through behavior. Small actions at the beginning of the day carry more weight than they appear to. Reading a few pages, writing a plan, moving your body, completing a simple task. These are not significant on their own, but they establish a pattern of execution. They signal to your mind that you are in control, that you follow through, that you do not wait. And once this pattern is established, it becomes easier to continue. Momentum is not created by intensity. It is created by consistency. The Stoics understood that discipline is built through repetition, not through occasional effort. If you win the morning, you do not eliminate difficulty, but you change your relationship with it. You are no longer reacting to what happens. You are directing your actions with intention. Challenges still appear. Distractions still exist, but they do not define your behavior. You have already made the first decision, and that decision carries forward. This is why the morning matters. It is not about productivity. It is about control. It is about proving, in the simplest way possible, that you are capable of leading yourself. The opposite is also true. When you lose the morning, you enter the day in a state of compromise. You begin by breaking your own standard, and that weakens your authority over yourself. It becomes easier to delay again, easier to justify inaction, easier to follow the path of least resistance. Over time, this pattern creates a cycle that is difficult to break, not because it is complex, but because it is familiar. You become accustomed to starting your day without intention, and that becomes your default state. The Stoics did not rely on motivation to begin their day. They relied on duty. They understood that each day is an opportunity to practice discipline, to align with reason, to act in accordance with their values. This perspective removes the need for emotion to be present. You do what must be done because it is your responsibility to do it. And when you approach your morning in this way, you stop asking whether you feel like it, and you start acting because it is required. In the end, the first hours of your day are a reflection of your ability to govern yourself. They reveal which voice you follow, which standard you uphold, which version of yourself you are reinforcing. There is no audience, no recognition, no immediate reward, only a decision that sets the tone for everything that follows. And if you can win this quiet, unseen battle consistently, you build a level of control that extends far beyond the morning itself. You will not change your life by changing isolated actions. You will only change your life when you change who you believe you are. The Stoics understood that behavior is not random. It is an expression of character, and character is shaped by repeated choices that form identity. Most people attempt to improve their lives by adjusting habits on the surface. They try to wake earlier, work harder, stay consistent. But beneath those efforts, they still see themselves as the same person. Someone who struggles, someone who hesitates, someone who eventually returns to comfort. And because identity remains unchanged, behavior eventually follows the same pattern. You do not act against your identity for long. You return to it. If you see yourself as someone who lacks discipline, every difficult moment becomes evidence of that belief. If you see yourself as someone who gives up, every obstacle becomes a reason to stop. This is not because you lack strength, but because your mind seeks consistency with what it believes to be true. The Stoics would say that your judgment of yourself determines your actions more than any external condition. You live in alignment with your self-image, whether that image serves you or limits you. This is why temporary motivation fails. It attempts to push action without transforming identity. And without that transformation, the old pattern returns. To change your life, you must adopt a new standard of who you are, not as a future goal, but as a present decision. You do not wait to become disciplined. You decide that you are disciplined, and you act accordingly. You do not wait to become consistent. You choose to be consistent now, even in small actions. This is not a matter of affirmation. It is a matter of alignment. Every decision you make either reinforces your new identity. There is no neutral action. When you follow through on what you said you would do, even in something small, you confirm to yourself that you are reliable. When you delay or avoid, you confirm the opposite. Over time, these confirmations accumulate, and identity becomes solid. The Stoic approach requires you to remove emotion from this process. You do not ask how you feel about the action. You ask whether the action aligns with who you have decided to be. If it does, you act. If it does not, you refuse. This creates clarity. You are no longer negotiating with your moods. You are following a principle, and principles are stable, while emotions are not. When your behavior is guided by principles, consistency becomes possible. Not because the work becomes easier, but because your decision-making becomes simpler. There is no debate, only execution. There is a misconception that identity is something you discover, but the Stoics would argue that identity is something you construct through disciplined action. You become a certain type of person by repeatedly acting in accordance with that type. A person who keeps their word is not defined by intention, but by the act of keeping it, again and again. A person who is resilient is not defined by claiming strength, but by continuing through difficulty without retreat. Identity is built through evidence, and that evidence is created by your daily choices. This is why small actions matter more than large declarations. Anyone can decide who they want to be, but very few reinforce that decision consistently. You do not need to prove your identity to others. You need to prove it to yourself. Each time you act in alignment with your chosen standard, you strengthen that identity. Each time you fail to act, you weaken it. Over time, the accumulation of these moments determines how you see yourself, and how you see yourself determines what you believe is possible. The old version of you is tied to an identity that is familiar. It is comfortable because it requires less effort, less responsibility, less discipline, but it also limits what you can achieve. The new version of you demands more. It requires consistency, accountability, and a willingness to act without relying on motivation. This transition is not comfortable because you are challenging a pattern that has been reinforced over time. But discomfort is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is a sign that you are changing. You must be willing to let go of the identity that no longer serves you, not gradually, not conditionally, but completely. You cannot claim a new standard while still allowing the old one to dictate your actions. The Stoics emphasized integrity, the alignment between what you say, what you think, and what you do. Without this alignment, identity remains fragmented. You act one way in intention and another in behavior, and this creates internal conflict. But when alignment is established, when your actions consistently reflect your chosen identity, that conflict disappears. In the end, your life does not change because you want it to. It changes because you become someone different, not in appearance, not in words, but in behavior that is repeated until it becomes natural. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. And if you want a different result, you must first decide who you are, and then act in a way that makes that decision real. Discipline is not punishment. It is the structure that frees you from the version of yourself that keeps you trapped. Most people misunderstand discipline because they associate it with restriction, with forcing themselves to do what they do not enjoy, with removing comfort from their lives. But the Stoics saw discipline differently. They saw it as a form of self-governance, the ability to act according to reason rather than impulse. Without discipline, you are not free. You are controlled by whatever you feel in the moment. And what you feel is unstable, inconsistent, and often misleading. The person without discipline believes they are free because they can do whatever they want. But in reality, they are reacting to every urge, every distraction, every moment of discomfort. They delay when things become difficult. They quit when motivation fades. They avoid what requires effort. This is not freedom. It is dependency on comfort. The Stoics would argue that true freedom is the ability to choose what is right, even when it is difficult, even when it goes against your immediate desire. That is what discipline provides. It removes the control that your impulses have over your actions. The old version of you depends on negotiation. It looks for ways to reduce effort, to postpone responsibility, to justify inaction. It asks questions like, do I feel like doing this? Is this the right time? Can I start later? These questions seem harmless, but they create hesitation, and hesitation weakens action. Discipline removes this negotiation entirely. It replaces it with a standard. You do what must be done because it is required, not because you feel ready. This shift is what breaks the cycle of inconsistency. You are no longer waiting for the right moment. You are creating it through action. There is a cost to discipline, but it is not as high as most people think. The discomfort you feel when you act against your impulses is temporary. It exists in the moment, and then it passes. But the discomfort of regret, of knowing that you avoided what you should have done, that you allowed yourself to remain where you are, that you failed to follow through on your own commitments. That discomfort does not pass easily. It lingers, it accumulates, and it shapes how you see yourself. The Stoics were clear on this. It is better to endure the short discomfort of discipline than the lasting weight of regret. Every time you act with discipline, you weaken the influence of your old self. You reduce the power of the habits that have kept you in the same place. This does not happen instantly, and it does not happen without resistance. The old patterns will continue to appear. The impulse to avoid effort will not disappear, but it becomes easier to ignore. Because with each disciplined action, you create evidence that you are capable of more. You prove to yourself that you can act without relying on how you feel. And that proof builds confidence. Not the kind that comes from words, but the kind that comes from repeated experience. The Stoic approach to discipline is not extreme. It is consistent. It does not require perfection. It requires commitment. You will not act perfectly every time. You will not eliminate all distractions, but you can choose to return to your standard without excuse. When you fail, you correct. When you hesitate, you move forward. There is no need for self-criticism that leads to inaction, only the need for awareness and adjustment. Discipline is not about forcing yourself into an ideal. It is about aligning yourself with what you have already decided is necessary. As discipline becomes part of your behavior, it begins to feel less like effort and more like identity. What once required resistance becomes natural. You no longer question whether you should act. You simply act. This is when discipline becomes freedom. You are no longer controlled by fluctuations in mood, by temporary discomfort, by the desire to avoid effort. You operate according to principle, and that creates stability. Your actions become predictable. Your progress becomes consistent, and your sense of control over your life increases. The old version of you cannot survive in an environment of discipline. It depends on inconsistency, on hesitation, on moments where you choose comfort over action. When those moments are reduced, its influence fades. It does not disappear completely, but it loses its ability to direct your behavior. You hear the impulse, but you do not follow it. You recognize the desire to avoid effort, but you continue anyway. This is what it means to free yourself, not by removing difficulty, but by removing the control that difficulty has over you. In the end, discipline is not something that restricts your life. It is something that defines it. It determines whether you remain where you are or move forward. It decides whether you act according to your potential or according to your impulses. And once you understand that discipline is not a burden but a tool, not a punishment but a form of control, you begin to use it differently. You no longer resist it. You rely on it, because it is the one thing that allows you to step beyond the limitations of your old self and become someone who is no longer controlled by comfort. Life does not begin to reward you when circumstances change. It begins to reward you when your decisions change. And that shift happens the moment you stop losing to yourself. Most people wait for results before they change their behavior. They look for signs that things are improving, that opportunities are appearing, that the environment is becoming more favorable. But the Stoics understood that outcomes follow character, not the other way around. The external world responds to who you have become, not to what you hope will happen. And until you establish control over your own actions, nothing outside of you will remain stable. When you stop losing to yourself, the first thing that changes is not your results. It is your consistency. You begin to follow through on what you said you would do. You wake when you decided to wake. You act when you planned to act. You complete what you started. These are small victories, often unnoticed by others, but they are significant because they restore trust within yourself. The Stoics valued this internal integrity above all else. When your actions align with your principles, you remove internal conflict. You no longer debate with yourself. You no longer hesitate. You move with clarity. And clarity creates momentum. This momentum is what eventually produces visible change. Not because life suddenly becomes easier, but because your response to difficulty becomes stronger. Challenges that once stopped, you now become part of your process. Discomfort that once caused delay now becomes expected. You are no longer surprised by resistance. You are prepared for it. This shift is what allows progress to compound. While others wait for ideal conditions, you continue acting. While others rely on motivation, you rely on discipline. And over time, this difference becomes impossible to ignore. Life rewards consistency because consistency creates reliability, and reliability creates results. Not immediately, but inevitably. The Stoics did not believe in luck as a primary force. They believed in preparation, meeting opportunity. When you are consistent, you are prepared. When you are disciplined, you are ready. And when opportunity appears, you are capable of taking it. Most people miss opportunities not because they are unlucky, but because they are not prepared to act when the moment arrives. They hesitate, they doubt, they delay. But when you have trained yourself to act regardless of how you feel, hesitation loses its power. There is also a deeper reward that comes from no longer losing to yourself, a sense of control that cannot be taken from you. External success can change, circumstances can shift, but the knowledge that you can rely on your own actions remains constant. This is what the Stoics considered true strength, not dominance over others, but mastery over oneself. When you reach this point, your confidence is no longer dependent on outcomes. It is built on evidence. You have proven to yourself, repeatedly, that you can act with discipline, that you can follow through, that you can endure discomfort without retreating. This internal stability changes how you experience life. You are no longer driven by comparison, because your focus is on your own standards. You are no longer controlled by external validation, because your sense of worth comes from your actions. You are no longer easily discouraged by setbacks, because you understand that progress is a process, not a single event. The Stoics emphasized that peace comes from alignment with your values, not from external success. And when you stop losing to yourself, you begin to experience that alignment. The rewards of this shift are not always immediate or visible, but they are consistent. You think more clearly because you are not constantly negotiating with yourself. You act more decisively because you are not waiting for permission from your emotions. You recover more quickly from failure because you are focused on correction, not avoidance. Over time, these advantages accumulate. What once felt difficult becomes normal. What once felt impossible becomes manageable. And what once felt out of reach begins to move closer. It is important to understand that life does not reward perfection. It rewards persistence. You will not win every internal battle. You will not act perfectly every day, but you can refuse to return to the pattern of surrender. When you recognize a mistake, you correct it. When you fall short, you adjust. There is no need for delay, no need for self-punishment that leads to inaction. The Stoics practiced continuous improvement, not because they expected perfection, but because they valued progress. In the end, everything returns to the same principle. You are your own competition, not in comparison to others, but in comparison to who you were yesterday. When you stop losing to that previous version, when you consistently choose discipline over comfort, action over delay, principle over impulse, your life begins to change, not through sudden transformation, but through steady progression. And as that progression continues, the external world begins to reflect the internal order you have created. Life does not reward you for what you intend to do. It rewards you for what you consistently do. And when you reach the point where you can rely on yourself without hesitation, where your actions align with your standards without negotiation, you no longer need to chase success. It becomes a natural result of the person you have become.